and I had a cousin who was heavily into it. She lived in a transcendental meditation community near Dijon, France, the year I studied on the other side of France, near Nantes. I went to visit her one weekend, and here are the two things I remember. On the way there, I stayed in a hotel by myself for the first time in my life because my train had arrived too late for my cousin to pick me up that night. And when I left that weekend, my cousin gave me a bag of cashews, which were extremely impossible to find in France, and I was thrilled to have them until I accidentally left them on the train. What do I remember about spending the weekend in that remarkable community? Nothing. I'm sure I could go back to my journal. But in my adult life, I have tried meditation a number of times, although I admit never for more than a few days at a time. I'll sit somewhere quietly, make sure my body is comfortable, focus on my breath, and my squirrely brain goes zip, ping, zow. I have even tried telling myself that I will try to stay focused on my breathing for just 10 breaths and can count on the one hand the number of times I've succeeded at doing that before my mind wanders. So is it hopeless for me? I don't think so. I have benefited in my life from practices that bring me back to myself, into the present moment. Many years ago, my mother told me, and I know she'd heard this somewhere, that meditation is learning to do one thing at a time. That has always resonated with me, perhaps because it is short and sweet and is easy to remember. So when I'm driving to work, fiddling with the radio and thinking about all the things I need to accomplish that week, I stop and remind myself to do one thing at a time. Then I focus on driving and on what I'm seeing as I drive down the road. Flowers and gardens, beautiful trees, the bicyclist I'm passing, and I feel calmer within myself. When I turned 50, I treated myself to a weekend retreat for physicians with Dr. Rachel Naomi Remen, the author of Kitchen Table Wisdom and the founder of Commonweal. Part of her life work has been to teach healers about taking care of the soul as well as the body. During that weekend, Dr. Remen taught us a centering technique that was easy and, as she put it, could be done whenever and wherever you needed it without anyone around you being aware of it. The technique was to pay attention to that brief pause between exhaling one breath and inhaling the next. Try it yourself. Whenever I remember to do it, I can feel a coming back into the center of myself. Finally, I accidentally discovered a mindful technique when I was going through a divorce. I was in a lot of pain that year, grieving my marriage and feeling unmoored. One day, I happened to put my hand on my chest and lightly press, and found that it cut through the grief and brought me back to myself. I repeated that gesture many times that year and have found it useful on occasion since then. Again, when I remember to do it. So while I don't set aside time in my life to sit and formally meditate, I do have these simple centering practices in my daily life, and they help me to stay in the here and now.
Meditation on the Power of We by Alandra Williams. Put your feet down because you're about to do embodiment. Close your eyes. Breathe in and out. When you hear the word liberation, liberatory spirit, liberatory life, liberatory possibilities, what does that conjure in your soul? When you hear, we are the liberating force, spirit, light, and love, what does that conjure in your spirit? When you hear, we have the power to transform the world around us, what does that mean in your bones? When you hear, we are the people that we have been waiting for, we are, how does that feel in your blood? We are the light. We are the wisdom. We are the ancestors. We are those yet to come. Look, how do we fully hold all that is in ourselves? Open your eyes. Look at the people around you and go out and organize. As a UU, a lot of us may or may not have spiritual leaders. And as a UU, I would say I don't. But one man has really influenced a lot of my thinking, and more than any other, and that's Thich Nhat Hanh, whose given name is Nhat Hanh. Nhat Hanh was born in 1926. He was the fifth of 6 children. And at a very early age, at 7 or 8, he recalls seeing a drawing of Buddha and feeling a great joy from it. And he also recalls the story that Megan read for us, going to look for the hermit and finding the beautiful well water and feeling spiritually connected by that. So at age 12, he decided he wanted to train as a monk, and his parents felt very cautious about this idea. But by age 16, he had convinced them, and he became a novice monk for 3 years and was trained in Buddhism, learned English, Chinese, and French. He later went to university, and he supported himself by selling books and poetry. He studied literature, philosophy, psychology, and science, and received a degree in French literature and Vietnamese literature. He was editor of a Buddhist magazine for 2 years, but always the rebel. He was suspended and he was expunged from his temple because he had a radical idea that all Buddhists should join together and form like a universal group. So he taught high school, wrote, and wrote. The man wrote and wrote and wrote. He has so many books, and they're all beautiful. He taught courses at the temple, where, once again, he got fired for being a radical, for this idea of continuing to say that they should unite. So he took the Fulbright scholarship and went to Princeton. But he returned to Vietnam during the Buddhist crisis and became very politically involved. And then in the Vietnam War, he spoke out that both sides needed to cease, and he wouldn't take either side. But he said that he was for peace, and it had to stop, and he thought that the U.S. should make reparations or repair the damage in Vietnam. So he got booted out of his own country, and he moved to France. During this time, he also became friends with Thomas Merton and Martin Luther King Jr. And Martin Luther King nominated him for the Peace Prize, the Nobel Peace Prize. He said, "I do not personally know of anyone more worthy of the Nobel Peace Prize than this gentle monk from Vietnam. His ideas for peace, if applied, would build a monument to ecumenism, to the world of brotherhood, to humanity." And no one was nominated for the Peace Prize that year. So in France, Thich Nhat Hanh became the chair of the Vietnamese Buddhist peace delegation, which was involved in the Paris Peace Accords, and established the Unified Buddhist Church. And he continued to write, of course, and to teach. Later, in the mid-70s, he started an operation where he would take donations from all sorts of people, and he and other people would get boats and go out on the Gulf of Siam and take food and rescue the boat people, because Singapore would not let them land. They just preferred they stay out there and drown. And some of the fisher people would find these people and help them, and then there'd be huge fines against them, so they became scared of helping them. So he went out there with a lot of help and tried to get these people to the French embassy where they could be rescued. But the Singapore caught him, and they gave him 24 hours to leave the country. There was an ambassador became involved, and they had 10 days to get out. And so he went back to France, which is home for most of his life, and he started the Plum Village. And his tradition of Buddhism is called the Plum Village tradition. And it's an engaged Buddhism. So this means that he doesn't believe that you should just sit in meditation until you achieve enlightenment when other people are suffering. He's been always through his life called to do something about it. And he was in Vietnam, like meditating in temples, and they could hear bombs outside. So that was probably a huge impact on him coming to this engaged Buddhism. He's considered the father of mindfulness and a huge influence on Buddhist practice in the West. So Buddhism is a monastic tradition, is not traditionally like lay people don't engage in it. Lay people donate money to the monks who set aside their whole life to meditate and become enlightened. But Thich Nhat Hanh feels like mindfulness is for everyone. And so he's come up with a lot of ways of meditating. It's not like sitting in an uncomfortable position for hours. You can be mindful when you're in the moment. You're doing what you're doing. And Mike's at home watching me in Zoom, and he's going to laugh. Because I hate doing the dishes. And Mike would say, when have you done a dish? I'm like, I've done a couple this year. Give me a break. But like Thich Nhat Hanh, one meditation that I have tried, and it's very different experience is to wash the dishes. And when you wash the dishes, you wash each dish as though you're washing the baby Buddha. You're feeling the temperature of the water, the slipperiness of the soap. You're treating each dish with great care. So you can do a walking meditation where you just walk like very, very slowly. And if you're barefoot, you might feel the grass on your feet or the carpet through your toes and the air and your breathing and the movement of your body. So it's a much gentler type of Buddhism. And he feels like this practice of mindfulness is what got him through those early years in France. In those early years, he talks about it was just so hard to be like separated from his home and not know if he would ever be able to return. But the most powerful story to me about who this man is, like he's exiled from his country that was being bombed, his people were being killed. And so he started, after the war, he started retreats for American soldiers to come and heal. So there was a man who, and the first retreat was really crazy because these soldiers were scared they were being lured there to be killed or punished. There was one man, he had a tent out in the woods and he put traps around his tent because he was afraid these monks were going to come hurt him at night. It was just a really, really hard retreat because a lot of the men were scared to talk. They were scared for their safety to trust that someone from Vietnam was there to help them heal. But they did break through. And so one soldier spoke to Thich Nhat Han and said, I killed 5 children in Vietnam. He killed 5 children. He said most of his platoon, his best friends, his buddies in war were killed by men in this village. So the soldier took sandwiches, a bag of sandwiches with explosives in them, and set it on the wall on the edge of the building and hid out and watched these children come and be severely injured, and he knew they would die. The hospital was very far. He knew there was no hope for these children and saw their parents come and be with these children. So he tells this to Thich Nhat Hanh. And Thich Nhat Hanh says, that is in the past. You can never change it. You have to be in the present. He said, you must save the life of 5 children. There are children in this world, there are children in the U.S. that are dying. Save 5 or 50. Some of them just need warmth or some medicine or very simple things. And this soldier spent the rest of his life saving children. Thich Nhat Hanh said mindfulness is like a boat in a river of suffering. And long as you stay in that boat and keep going, you will be safe. So, what about today? Why this topic? I feel so many of us in this congregation feel disturbed about our political times, in the political atmosphere, and feel angry at times. Some of us feel angry, some of us feel hopeless, some of us maybe want to disengage. But I think Thich Nhat Hanh would say, stay in the moment, be mindful of the moment, and do what you can do, let the rest go. And that's why I chose the Serenity Prayer. It's such a powerful prayer. And I didn't plan to, but I'd like to end on it. If Malachi could go back to that slide. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change things I can, the wisdom to know the difference, living one day at a time, enjoying 1 minute at a time, accepting hardship as a pathway to peace, taking this broken world as it is.